Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Managing Disruptive Change. We're looking at the third dimension, the third big dimension, which is the regulatory changes and their influence on disruption. We had the market trends, which affect customer behavior competitors, with the technology trends, and now we look at the regulatory changes as an origin. It is not, if regulation changes, it will lead to new technologies, new market, competitive behavior, but the origin is in the regulatory change. And this is why, again, it's important also to understand the change in regulation. And what you can do is you can look at the regulatory changes in your specific countries. They're very much different. If I come from my German perspective, we had a very regulated communications industry. So we had just had one telecommunication provider. That has been changed. And we had the power industry with the monopoly. That has been changed. And then we had the transportation industry, like Deutsche Bahn basically had a monopoly. That has been changed. And so it is the same in your country. So looking at that on a country level, a very specific level, makes a lot of sense. This is why we didn't collect all the changes in every different countries, since we have a global audience right now. But it makes sense to look at that and try to understand what changes were following this regulatory change. And one deep dive here is the energy industry, which has been changed in Germany years ago, which first of all led to having different power suppliers in Germany. So it is a change of the industry in that way that, first of all, the energy market was strongly regulated and the liberalization of the new market led to new players. But not only new players, and this is very interesting, but also to new demand. People didn't want power from traditional sources, like atomic energy, for example. There are lots of people who are against atomic energy in Germany, and what they're saying basically is if you supply power to me, I don't want to have it from atomic plants. I only want to have it from green sources. I'm willing to pay more for green sources. And those companies, new offerings like green electricity companies, came up into the market. And they can potentially disrupt Germany in the German power market. As we can see right now, Germany is really on the forefront of pushing green energy in the world. And it really started with some of the customers who said, I do not only want to have power, I want to have power from very restricted sources. And so energy industry is an example for a regulatory change. And you see, it is to some extent the Christensen way of the established industry develops in a way that they say, okay, we especially have to be more cost efficient. This is the main issue for the industry, but there's a niche of people who are willing to pay more for various different sources. So every time regulation changes, it leaves room for entrepreneurial actions. And this will definitely happen. And the big players in the market have to take care for that. And it needs a lot of management attention to understand the regulatory change in order to react properly to that. And we'll see that if Uber is coming to other countries. In some countries, it's not allowed so far, but might change the regulation also there, and then we'll have an entirely different transportation market, for example, which at the very end now leads to having 4 dimensions, which are triggers of change. And the first dimension, the first 2 dimensions, so to say, are those market changes. Market, which is competition plus customers, and you might have new competitors who just redevelop a market. Uber is a good example for that. Or you might have customers, and energy market was a good example for that. However, the main trigger came out of the regulation. So you might have customers who want different products. Our leisure orientation, for example, lead to an entirely new sports offering, for example. So this is where disruption, first of all, might come from. And these are the two main dimensions. Either it's coming out of new competitors who redevelop a market, or it's out of our own behavior, our customer behavior, who want new things and have impact on new business model. Secondly, we have technological changes, and we saw all those technological changes, and we can easily see that they have a big impact on companies. People are buying many things in the internet, Christmas gifts, and if you look at what this means for stationary warehouses and stores, it's in some smaller cities, it's a disaster how those cities look like, because those stores go bankrupt right now. They have to at least redevelop themselves. And the third driver is the regulative environment, and we saw that. It's a very country-specific thing, or maybe it's a European Union-specific thing, whatever. It's very region-specific. Your government is going to initiate a change, and this change in regulation always leads to new competitors. First, in the established market, like power industry, established power players came out, the energy companies, and then after that, new customer behavior. So if we look at those four dimensions, what we can do, and this is our first step, we can look at all those changes in the world. To better understand them, it is important to put them into those four dimensions, and then using those four dimensions to derive actions. But before we go into those actions, we can see that those four dimensions in some combinations very specifically will lead to disruption patterns, which we'll introduce next week.